before we start, are there any questions about anything we've done so far? Okay, then. Today we are going to go over what I call intermediate question design. Last week we talked about how to create new questions and all the various options you can have with the different types of questions there are. We went a little bit into totally spacing on it, validation. We mentioned just a little bit about skip and display logic. And I apologize for the background noise. I am home today, and our vicious Jack Russell goes crazy every time the wind blows. Getting back to Qualtrics, which is why we're here today. Today we'll go over display logic and skip logic. Logic in Qualtrics is not necessarily logical to human beings, but there are a lot of instances where you'll need to use it. So we'll take our time with this and talk about it because it can be very useful. We'll also talk about randomizing responses within a question, as well as randomizing all of the questions within a block. So as you can see here, I started a little bit of a questionnaire. How old are you? Some options. How do you describe yourself? How many children under 18 live with you? Your employment status, your marital status, some typical demographic type questions. And these things can work with any kind of question, really. Display logic. Use display logic when you're working with a single question, or even with, you can even apply it to individual possible responses in a question. And as you might guess, what it means is, do you want to display this question to your respondent or not? It's good for one question or two that might follow each other. If you don't want people to answer a whole bunch of questions, then you should be using skip logic, which we'll go over in just a minute. As I mentioned, the logic in Qualtrics can be a little tricky, especially with the computer meaning versus the human meaning of and or. So let's take a look at this. Let's say we ask people, how old are you? And if they're under 18, let's say we do not want to show this question. So we can come down here to display logic. And the logic, all the various logics in Qualtrics work the same, so that makes your life a little bit easier. There's display logic, the skip logic, and once we get into it in a couple of weeks, branch logic and survey flow all works just like this. So as you'll see in a lot of things, you can base it off a question, embedded data if you already have that. We're going to talk about that when we do survey flow as well. A quota, information in a contact list, information from loop and merge, which we'll talk about. I think that's next week. Whether it's a true, false, or even what type of device they're using, whether they're on, say, a laptop or a phone. And you can select the question. Actually, I'm going to close this because we want to put the display on this question. Of course, you have, if you're just working off of a question, then the question has to have already been answered. So we're going to say, how old are you? It says display this question only if the following condition is met. So we'll say 18 to 20, actually under 18. And then you have some choices: is selected, is not selected, is displayed, is not displayed. And these last two, displayed, really come in when you're using carry forward logic, as well as if you're displaying or not displaying individual choices. So we want that question to be displayed if they are if they do not select under 18. If they select under 18, then we don't want it shown. So we'll click save. And what's nice is you see you get this note on top, so you know where this is, that there's display logic on it and what the criteria are. And you can always come over here and you can edit it or just take it out altogether. Now, one thing with Qualtrics is it will save automatically as you go along. But sometimes when you make changes like this, and especially if you're working in the survey flow or you're doing loop and merge, it doesn't always, I guess, save everything, all that logic and everything that goes behind it. So sometimes you have to hit publish to get everything in. And publish only means, save everything and make a, what Qualtrics calls a published version, which, is like a major version, a 0.0 version. So I'm going to hit publish, and you can get this review thing, and you can look at recommendations if you want. We'll go over that at some point. And I'm just going to say okay, because now we can come over here to preview. And so if I select under 18, it should not show that next question about how I describe myself. And that's what worked. We skipped that question. I'm going to restart it. Now I am going to, I'll click something else. And we should see that new question. How do you describe yourself? Okay, so I am going to close this up. Now, when we did this the first time around, you might have noticed there's this little box here called in page. And this is only how or when that question gets displayed. In page means that it will if you notice before, when there was just that one question. And so if I click under 18, or if I change, you can see how below it shows or does not show. And so that display in page is just, kind of how it works, how the flow goes. It doesn't change Certainly doesn't change the answers. It doesn't mean people will or won't see the question as they're supposed to. Now, sometimes you need more than one criteria. I'm just going to click save for now, and we'll go down, say, to the next question. We'll do display logic again. Question, how old are you? 18 is not selected. And we want to include the other question as well. So instead of how old are you, how do you describe yourself? I'm just going to say male here is selected. Now, if you'll see, it said, you have this condition and then you have this one. By default, Qualtrics will put an and in between those. So both of these conditions need to be met for this question to be displayed. Of course, there's something called or, and one or the other need to be satisfied for the condition to be met. Once you get into doing logic like this, you really, really need to test and make sure that it's working the way that you want it to. So let's close that up and let's take a look. So right now it's or, so either one of these. Under 18 is not selected, or male is. So I'll say 18 to 24. And it was displayed. Say under 18. Because it was under 18, it didn't display. We were using or, so it's one or the other. Close this up. Now there's another thing in here you'll see. Under this, there's this move to a new logic set. And so you can have, this is like putting, if you're familiar with SQL or other types of database and searching, and even if you're doing some advanced Google searching, you can do this. It's like putting parentheses around different conditions or sets of conditions. So you can have two conditions in here. And I'm going to do just to show you. So now this top part is evaluated. So question 2 under 18 is not selected, and how you describe yourself, male, is selected. Both must be selected for this part of the condition to be met. Then I'll come down and look at this part of the condition, and both of these must be met for this second half of the display logic. And since there's an and in between both of these at the same time, so we'll evaluate this as true or false. If it's true, it'll go on. And if this is true, then everything is satisfied. If if this is false, then it won't work because this whole thing. And this will work differently when you have these logic sets than if you just had all four of these conditions going through. It gets kind of confusing for one. So if you get into that situation, save everything, go get a cup of coffee and come back to it. But as I say, and of course you can change it to and if or if, and you can add another logic set below that. As I say, if this starts getting really complicated, put it down for a little bit and come back and rethink it. Because maybe there's a simpler way to get at what you want and what questions you need. Excuse me, to do this kind of this logic. But as I say, all of the logic in Qualtrics works this way. So it's a good thing to know. Close this up. Are there any questions so far? Okay. Skip logic, as I mentioned, you've all seen it in surveys. It says, if you answer yes to this question, please skip to question 10. So let's do, and it says skip from this question to, and you can do either the end of the block and it goes on from the rest of the survey, or you can go straight to the end of the survey, or you can go to any other question within that same block. You cannot skip to a specific question in the next block or another block further down. So it's either in that block, the end of the block, or the end of the survey. Oh, I'm just going to put in end of survey. Working full-time is selected. And again, it shows you what you have there, and it's the same. Edit conditions, advanced options, remove. We'll look at advanced in a moment. You know what I'm going to do? Come up here and ignore validation. Do that, do that. See, now with this one, I said working full-time, and it should skip to the end of the survey. So maybe this is a survey for people who are only working part-time. Let's see, and then it continues on. So, as I say, it works within the block, to the end of that block, which is also basically the beginning of the next, as well as the end of the survey. Let's take a look at advanced options. And all it does is it includes the quota. Why they don't just put that in the regular window, I don't know. We'll be talking about quotas later on. Basically, it's just, say in this survey, you want 100 people who are 18 to 24 and 100 people who are 25 to 60. You can set up a quota, and so the skip logic can be based on that quota. I doubt you'll use that a whole lot, but just to show you what's there. Are there any questions about skip logic or even display logic? Okay. The other thing that you can do, that we'll go over today, is you can randomize your responses within a question. And so go here, we'll use this one. I'm just going to remove this so we don't have a whole bunch of stuff getting in our way. And come over here to the left and you click choice randomization. You can get this box, and anytime you're doing any kind of randomization, you get these choices. So, for choice randomization, question randomization, and even blocked randomization, when we get into survey flow, it all looks just like this. Display answers in a random order does exactly that. Each respondent, every time somebody comes into the survey, Qualtrics will randomize the order of the possible responses there. You can also have it present only a certain number of the choices. So let's say you have, in some situation, you have 50 different choices. Well, people aren't going to choose, that's a big long list. So you can say randomly show each time, pick 10 at random and only show 10 choices to each respondent. Randomly flip the order of choices is just like it sounds. It will flip the order back and forth randomly. And as it says here, it's automatically checked, consistently reverse the choice order for all questions with this randomization option selected. This just means that it's going to make sure that half the people get one order and half the people get the other order, which is typically what you would want. And then there's advanced randomization. Let's see, can I get this box bigger? Now, because I'm limited on my screen here, usually there's another part. We'll scroll down. All of these, if you're on a bigger screen, will show up on the right here, and that makes your life a lot easier when you're working with this. Unfortunately, we're going to have to go back and forth. So you can see we have all of our options here. And so you can randomize choices. You can pick which ones you want, and you can put all of them in the list, and it just randomizes all the choices, which is no different than that very first option in the previous window. And you can see it says randomized, randomized. And so what Qualtrics will do is it will randomize the order of these two particular choices. All the other ones will stay in the same order. So sometimes this one will be the first question, and this will be the third, and so, and it'll go back and forth. Working part-time will always be the second choice, and the rest will always be in this order at the end. Take these out. Randomly insert X choices from this list. Now we can put a couple more in here. And so now what it will do is we can say randomly insert one or two choices from this list. Now, as each respondent comes in, Qualtrics will randomly pick one of these and put it into the list at the end for your respondents to see. And this evenly displayed choices, you'll see this in a few places. What this means is Qualtrics will do its best to show each of these the same number of times. Of course, if the number of respondents you have is not divisible by 3, it's going to be off by 1 or 2. If you do not click this, then it's entirely possible that working full-time is shown twice, working part-time is shown 30 times, and unemployed and looking for work is shown 52 times. And whenever you're doing this, this comes up a lot when you do randomization in survey flow. We'll see this again, is edit count. Qualtrics will keep a count of how many times it's shown each of these possible options. And as you're testing, you want to come in and click Restore Original Counts. So right now it's 1 because we haven't done anything. And in particular, very, very, very important, before you actually administer the survey, send it out to your respondents, you want to come in here and restore the original counts. Otherwise, Qualtrics will just pick up from where it left off. And that is not what you want. So anytime you're doing this kind of randomization, you need to remember to come in and restore or reset all accounts. Randomly reverse choices. That's like on the very first randomization that we looked at, where you can flip the choices, the whole set back and forth. Well, you can do that with a subset of all your particular choices. And then you can even exclude choices from the list, and they're not displayed at all. I've very, very, very rarely seen that used, because if you don't want the choice displayed, why have it in there in the first place? But there might be some instances when you want that. Let's see, I'm going to move all these back. And as you can see, it kind of sometimes you can move things up and down as well. Are there any questions about choice randomization?
Paul,
Yes.
could you show us once more how you got to resetting the count?
Sure. So when you're in randomization and you're doing the advanced, that's really the only time it comes up. You come up, set up advanced. I'm just going to choose some of these so that we have something. And so it says evenly displayed choices, and then you come here to edit count.
Okay, thank you. That's the part I missed. I was taking notes and missed it.
That'll teach you to take notes.
Right?
And so you come over here to reset all counts. You want, especially as I say, when you're about to administer the survey, you want to reset all the counts back to 0. Otherwise, it's just going to pick up wherever it left off.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, great. Any other questions about choice randomization? Okay, now the other thing you can do, which is perhaps more common, is randomizing the questions. And you can randomize questions within a block. You can't do it from block to block. Block to block, you have to do it within each block. So you just highlight, click in the bot in the block to highlight it, and you get your options over here. And the question randomization is basically the same set of choices. No randomization, just randomize them as it goes through. Present only, however many questions. And the advanced randomization is exactly the same. Works just the same as the choice randomization. It does say, as I think I've mentioned, enabling question randomization will ignore page breaks, questions per page, skip logic, and override question order. And of course, in terms of accessibility, if you are displaying these question numbers to your respondents, these are going to be random as well. So again, that's something that you need to think about and decide for yourself. If you're not doing question randomization, then that's obviously not an issue. And of course, you need to be careful about when you're doing question randomization and you're doing any kind of display logic or skip logic, because questions that the display or the skip are based on might come after what you want displayed or skipped, in which case it's not going to work properly. But Qualtrics is pretty good if you do something, if you do the question randomization, you have some kind of skip logic or something in there, it will tell you, it will say, be careful about this, and not just in that one display that we saw. Are there any questions about question randomization? Are there questions about anything else we've done, either today or in previous weeks? Okay, we've got a couple of minutes. You've probably seen as I click this publish thing, you get this expert review. Let's talk about this for a second. It says view recommendations. So let's take a look at those. You always have to take, this is always, it's a good thing to do, but you kind of have to take it with a little grain of salt because sometimes the suggestions they make just aren't going to work for what you're doing and what you need to do. One of the things it suggests pretty consistently is if you have more than 3 text boxes for people to write answers in, it'll say, oh, you've got, 5 of these. You might want to think about, reducing the number to make it easier for your respondents to answer the questions. Well, sometimes you need 5 open-ended questions. And that's just the way life is sometimes. So as I say, you need to take it with a grain of salt, but usually a lot, this is good for just making sure that there isn't some weird thing going on. And that a lot of the things that they do say are working and your survey looks good. As it says, this one suggestion, bot detection, that's in the survey options that we talked about a couple of weeks ago. Similar to that is review. Check survey accessibility. Now this passed. Sometimes I'm gonna see, can I do something that won't pass? I'm gonna change this to a slider because I know that will not pass. Yeah. No, it did pass. Why did it pass? It's not supposed to pass with a slider. In any case, if there are questions that do not pass accessibility, what's nice is it will, you can click, say here, and it will take you to that question, and it'll give you some suggestions about what you might be able to do about it. And if you click there, we'll tell you more about what kinds of questions are or are not accessible. Any questions? Okay, then I will see all of you next Monday, back to our regularly scheduled time, Monday at 3 o'clock, and we will do advanced question design. Where we'll be doing some really neat stuff. That's all questions. We're doing loop and merge and some of the other things that are available. Okay, if you have any questions during the week, you know how to contact me, and thanks for your indulgence in the schedule change, and I'll see all of you next Monday.